Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. If you don't have a seat, please feel free to come and make yourself comfortable. My name's Seb Crutch. I'm one of the psychologists at the Dementia Research Centre and involved in leading dementia support. And this is...
I'm Nikki Zimmerman. I'm the group lead for the dementia support groups and the direct support team.
And as you all know, this is our joint carer meeting, so people coming to this meeting from right across the 6 and soon to be 7 support groups that we run through Rare Dementia Support. So if you find that you are wearing a very colourful badge, I actually might just skip forward to this sign, just to say there will be people here. You don't need to learn all these acronyms, by the way. We're not going to be testing anybody. But just to remind you that there are people here who live with a variety of different conditions. So people wearing a green badge tend to come from families where Alzheimer's disease runs genetically in their family. People with a red badge are probably supporting someone living with frontotemporal dementia, so those are the diseases affecting the front of the brain, which particularly challenge behaviour and language. People with the orange badges might be supporting someone who lives with the directly inherited form of that condition, FTD. People with the pink badges are likely to be supporting someone living with posterior cortical atrophy, which is tends to be a visual and spatial form of dementia. With blue badges, people who particularly are dealing with a dementia which affects language abilities, be it producing language or understanding language. And people in the dark, with a dark blue sticker, people living with dementia with Lewy bodies or Lewy body disease, which is often goes alongside Parkinson's disease. So in saying all of that, it's not to ask you to learn about all these different conditions necessarily, but just an awareness that some of the experiences shared by people at this meeting or the problems that other people were facing may align very closely with what you're going through. And others may be a bit more, it may be a little different. But we feel that in these groups there's enough commonality and enough opportunity to share and learn from each other's experiences, things that have worked, things that haven't worked, and just share those challenges that we feel these meetings are really beneficial, and we're really delighted to see that so many of you have come along today. I think just before we get into the sort of meat and drink of the agenda for the day, it's also just worth sharing a little bit of our excitement about the developments at Rare Dementia Support. As many of you will know, these used to be sort of fragmented groups, started at different times over many years, and then 4 years ago came together under this umbrella of Rare Dementia Support. And in the last few months, there have been exciting plans for enriching and developing the service. So we used to mainly run group meetings, and then we're gradually trying to ramp up the amount of one-to-one support that we can provide to you between meetings, because the meetings are really the best way of you sharing experience with each other, meeting other people in a similar boat. But Nikki and Claire and Livy and the direct support team are really keen to support you and help you navigate the many complexities of your situation, one-to-one by email and phone in between meetings. And also we're increasingly gathering a group of other professionals who are very keen to offer and lend their expertise and experiences to support people with more specific conditions. So we were really delighted 3 or 4 months ago when Anna Volkmer, a speech and language therapist, joined the team. In a few months' time, we'll have an Admiral nurse joining the team to bring particular expertise of people living with more advanced dementias and issues around palliative care. We're really pleased that actually some of the legal advice team from UCL are here today and will be available at lunchtime to talk to you, but to help people deal with practical and financial issues. And particularly, we're grateful that Colin Morris is here today. Colin's may be a familiar face to some of you. He's been to a number of meetings before, but today we'll be offering, rather than a general talk, we'll be offering one-to-one advice on benefits and related individual queries. I think most of Colin's very popular, so I think most of his slots have been taken up, but he will be around at lunchtime. There's your schedule. And of course, if there isn't an opportunity today, then we'd be keen to facilitate some form of support for you another time. And there are also exciting plans. Someone said, I think to Nikki a little bit earlier on, that they were sort of, what was the word, curious?
Curious how it's developed and evolved over the years.
Yeah, and so the plan to try and create a permanent home for the support groups and to try and reach out and seed groups right across the country. We currently have 25 regional groups, but of course many people aren't close either to London or to any of those, so we're keen to seed new groups in Bristol, in Leeds, in Scotland, and trying to get some of the support and opportunity to meet others in a similar situation closer to where people are living. And of course this exciting plan, which you'll hear about a little bit from Eva and Alexis in a moment, in terms of fundraising, to fundraise towards a physical centre, to be a home for the support groups, to be a real base for all of our operations, not just in London but across the country, and to support people internationally living with these rarer dementias. So I'd be very happy, I'll be around all day. If you have any particular questions or queries about any of those developments, I'd be happy to answer questions about them in the Q&A sessions or over lunchtime or afterwards. But just to get really exciting, I have to, before I get carried away, I have to remind you that we're not expecting any fire alarms today. But if you do hear one, there are these green signs indicating how we get out of the building, and we will all be around to direct you. The gathering point is in the centre of UCL. We also, it's worth me mentioning that there's a large team of folk from Rare Dementia Support here today. I won't shout through all the names, but many will look familiar to you from email correspondence, from being greeted downstairs. I think Claire and Livy are still downstairs welcoming in people. But there's a large group of us here with badges on, and very happy to talk with you and support you as best we can. So grab any of the members of the staff team if you have any questions or concerns about today. And with that, I think I will pass on to Alexis and Eva, who are poised, ready to tell you about fundraising related to Rare Dementia Support.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Eva Tate, and I'm the Major Appeals Manager for the National Brain Appeal, which is the charity that support Rare Dementia Support. Over the past 3 years, the National Brain Appeal have raised $150,000 a year to provide the current levels of support for the Rare Dementias, as well as carers meetings in London, and also the regional support network. I should let everyone know that there are travel and accommodation bursaries available to help members attend any of the meetings, so do feel free to take us up on that. This year we've raised the target to 250,000, and we'll continue to increase this target to 300 next year, and then 350,000 to develop and extend the service in the areas of education, support and research, with the ultimate aim that everybody who's affected by a rare dementia will be able to access support and information. We are about to launch our latest capital appeal to raise the funds necessary to establish the world's first centre for rare dementia support. And at the moment, the National Brain Appeal have committed between 3.5 and 7 million towards that. So that will be an incredibly exciting project to be involved in from our point of view, and hopefully for everybody here. And there'll be more details sort of released as the year continues. We apply for lots of grants from grant-making trusts and livery companies, and we're supported by a fantastic group of fundraisers, some of whom are here today. We would love it if you'd sign up to our RDS fundraising newsletter, which will be with my colleague Alexis over the lunch, and you'll just hear our updates and things. I don't write that many of them, so you won't get you won't be spammed with lots of information. At the end of February, we're holding a very special dinner, a gala dinner called the Mission Possible, and the aim of this evening, have I forgotten the slide? Mission Possible, which is a gala dinner held at the Cavalry and Guards Club, and that will the aim of that evening is to raise 100,000 for the further expansion of the service. We're holding a silent auction, which will open at the end of next week. And we will launch that on our website, so that's the National Brain Appeal website, but we will also send out an email from the Dementia Research Centre and our fundraising newsletter with the link to sign up to it. And there are some absolutely incredible prizes which start at a very, very modest level. So do feel free to bid on that or to send it to any well-off friends that you have. On that note, I would like to introduce Alexis, our Senior Fundraising Manager, who would like to talk to you about a very special marathon team.
Hello. So I'm Alexis. Thanks for listening. So you might recognise some of the people on this photo. We have a very special London Marathon team taking part this year. So we've got Chris, we've got Anna, we've got Nikki and Seb, who are all taking part in the London Marathon. And I believe training's going quite well.
I'd just like to add, I am 20 years older than Chris Hardy. So the sympathy vote is on me, please.
Our Red Dementia team, they're raising money for the new Red Dementia Centre, which is amazing that they're actually doing this incredible challenge for this project. This is a link to their Just Giving page. So they are asking for sponsorship. So if anyone can spare a little bit of money to sponsor them, they're putting a lot of work in to run the 26.2 miles at the end of April. So please do sponsor them. Also, if you'd like to come along to the marathon, we will be there on the course on the day. We'll have cheer points along the route. So please get in touch. It's a great atmosphere. You'll love it. It's a brilliant day. And the support is vital for the runners. So if anybody... Seb's nodding. If anybody wants to come along, I will be here at the lunch break. So come and say hello. I can give you my email address and we can keep in touch about where our cheer points will be. Likewise, if any of you are inspired to do any fundraising of your own, again, just come and have a chat with me. It doesn't have to be a marathon. It can be anything else, a bit smaller. So, yeah. Okay, I'll let you get on. Thank you.
Now, seriously, it is worth a few quid to see me after 26 miles. Won't be a pretty sight, but we will appreciate you there. So the agenda for today, we at 11:30 in 5 minutes, if we can get through this very quickly. We are so lucky to have Dr. Ada Suarez Gonzalez here today. She is a fantastic colleague of ours and, well, all you're going to hear is lots and lots of wise words today. So we're so pleased that she's joining us today. Lunchtime is at 12 till 1, so a nice, decent, long lunch, and hopefully we're going to have a lovely lunch today. And we have got the fundraising team here, so please do go and see them with all your ideas. And we have Katrina and her team here from the UCL Integrated Legal Advice team, who are fantastic. They'll give you some advice today, but you can also arrange a 1-hour free session for legal advice. And then this afternoon, we're going to break into some small group discussions, which I'm going to talk about a little bit after this. We're going to do them for 50 minutes. We trialled them at the FTD support group, which went really well, but they were only for half an hour, and everybody said, that's not long enough. We need more time. So we've extended them. It won't mean that you can move around in different groups today. You will be stuck with the same group, so my apologies if I'm boring you stupid for 50 minutes. But hopefully, it'll be really beneficial for people. And then we're just going to end this afternoon with Emily's going to talk a little bit about the RDS impact project that we're doing, which I know several of you are already involved in, but it would be great to have more people involved. And then we'll be handing out some feedback forms because we are, as you know, growing bigger and bigger. This is sort of quite groundbreaking that we're having so many of you here today. It's so fantastic. But we really would like to have sort of some feedback from yourselves of how you would like the groups to develop and what topics you'd like to cover in the future. So a little bit about the small groups discussions. We've got 4 groups today, and we're really lucky to have Jill and Kirsten with us. Jill Walton, many of you have known if you've been with RDS for a long time. She was instrumental with setting up the groups. And Kirsten is a nurse and a researcher with the palliative care team at UCL with Macmillan Trust. And they are going to be setting up some small courses going forward. So they're going to give you a bit of an introduction and ask for your input on caregiver grief. We've got a group on post-diagnostic support, which Claire and Emily will be facilitating, mid-stages with Livy and Roberta, and myself and Seb were doing the complex needs. So this is just a brief from Jill about what to expect in her group. I won't read it for you because I'm sure you can all read yourself. But I think it's crucial that we do realise the emotional impact that this has on you as carers. And I think this is going to be a really, really good discussion this afternoon. And that will be based in here. There will be a PowerPoint and some sort of notes taken for this, so we've given them a bigger space in here. Claire and Emily will be out the back, and this is for people that are newly diagnosed or need a bit more understanding of the condition. The pathways of health and social care, it is a complete maze out there, and if you are new to being diagnosed, it's very difficult to know where to start. So Claire is going to be giving you some great advice on what you need to know and where you need to go to find out. Livy and Roberta will be doing the mid-stages, so that is for any of you here today who's caring for a loved one with dementia. You're noticing some changes, you need to get some extra support in, you need to know where to go for extra help and advice and how to adapt sort of life sort of as the journey goes along. And then the last one is the complex needs one, so we're going to be looking at later stages, looking at care options and services that can support you in those later stages, preparing for emergencies, hospital admissions and discharges, and all sort of the complexities which we sort of don't really like to look at, but we really need to look at those later stages. So I'm now going to hand you over to Ada and enjoy the meeting.
I use this to flip things. Hello, everyone. So good morning, and thank you all for coming. It is my pleasure to be here today speaking about positive support. And the goal of this talk is to provide practical advice and tips about how to respond to challenging situations that may arise when someone is living with progressive cognitive difficulties. And the information that I will be providing today is based on the best available evidence to date, though this sometimes will come down to case series, case reports, or experimental research, rarely to randomized controlled trials. So, what's positive support? If I'm living with cognitive difficulties, positive support is the kind of help I get that enables me to make the most of my autonomy, my participation, and my decision making. So it is a way to make sure that my life is accessible and inclusive for me. So I remain at the very center of my own life. During the next few minutes, I will be discussing three main challenges that people with dementia face, and will be also explaining how to approach them from a positive support framework. So, delusions first. Delusions are false beliefs that seem very real for the person, even if there is a strong evidence that they are not real. And they are very common in people living with dementia. So this applies to many people here in the room. Many of you will have to support a relative or a friend dealing with these kind of issues. Delusions are very prevalent in people living with dementia with Lewy bodies and also with Alzheimer's disease. They are maybe less prevalent, but still present in people with behavioral variant frontotemporal dementia and posterior cortical atrophy, and they are quite rare in people living with primary progressive aphasia. Apparently, less than 5% of people with primary progressive aphasia develop some kind of delusions. And there are many types, but I will focus on the two most common kinds of delusions, which are paranoid delusions and delusional misidentifications. Paranoid delusions are false beliefs with a component of harm. So they want to steal my things, or the neighbors are speaking bad about me behind my back, or my family is planning to abandon me. So these are very common beliefs that have a component of harm, and that's what we call paranoid delusions. Delusional misidentifications are different. They don't come with a component of harm. The characteristic of these delusions is that people misidentify another person or an object or themselves when they look at their own image in the mirror. And the most common of the delusional misidentifications is the Kagras syndrome. This is when the person thinks that a close relative is an impostor, is not who the person says to be. And this happens because there is a disconnection between the areas of the brain that control the visual processing and the areas of the brain that control the emotional response in the limbic system. What I'm trying to say with this is that delusions are not a memory problem. And because they are not a memory problem, they don't respond well to memory cues. So sometimes when we face this situation, we try to convince the person that is wrong, we provide more information, we insist, it doesn't work because that's not the nature of the problem. And delusions are very real for the person. It's in the very definition of a delusion to be a very real feeling. Many of you have experienced déjà vus in your life. A déjà vu is when you have this very strong feeling of familiarity with a situation which is actually completely new. So if you've ever experienced this, you can understand what it's like to be experiencing a delusion. It's very real, it's a very strong feeling. It's not a thought, it's not an idea, it's a strong belief. So in this situation, how can we provide positive support? So there is not general agreement about the specific strategies that can help deal effectively with the delusion, but there is massive agreement about the goal to achieve. And it's this one. So this is the most important thing to take away from this talk today. Never ever fight a delusion. The most important thing is to de-escalate emotional distress. So the goal of the reaction that you may have is not to mitigate the delusion and is not to make it disappear, is to de-escalate distress. So your goal is to transform the delusion in a situation that you can live with. If you fight the delusion, you will scare the person who will get upset, and then you will get upset, and everybody will get upset, and things will be very stressful. So do not fight a delusion. Never fight a delusion. Because what we want to do is to build positive support, and we do this by generating a situation, creating a situation of safety and trust. And how can we do that? There are two general approaches that may or may not work, but this is what we are recommending nowadays, which is providing orientation. This is information when the person requests information, and accepting, validating the reality and the genuinity of the experience that the person is having. So let me set the scene. I'm on a Saturday morning in the kitchen at home, and my mom, who lives with cognitive difficulties, walks into the kitchen. She looks at me and she asks, "Who are you and what are you doing in the kitchen?" And I say, "Well, I'm your daughter and I'm here because I also live here. I'm orienting, I'm providing information that she's requesting." And then she says to me, "And how come you are my daughter and I'm not able to recognize you?" I keep providing information and I say, "Well, maybe it's because maybe your brain is taking a bit longer to wake up this morning and you need a bit more of time to notice that this is me. Would you like to start preparing breakfast in the meanwhile? Shall we prepare some coffee and some nice bread?" So we are trying to normalize the situation here, and we are responding with information to her requests. And this may work or not. So let me set scene 2. She walks into the kitchen, and I'm there. "Who are you? What are you doing in the kitchen?" "And I'm your daughter. I'm here because I also live here." "No, you are not my daughter. I know very well who my daughter is, and you look like her, but you are not her. So I stopped providing information because she's got a very clear idea of what is going on. And what I do is to walk into the delusion with her. So I apologize for the confusion. Well, my name is also Aida, and I think it will be very nice to have breakfast with you. So is it okay if I switch the kettle on? What I'm doing here is to avoid the conflict. We always avoid conflict because what we are trying to do is to create positive support. And keep in mind that creating positive support also has to do with redefining normality. And also has to do with understand and assimilate that reality has many dimensions and that the experience of the person in front of us is as real as our own experience in that moment. So please keep this in mind. This is, if you have to take with you one single idea from today, this is the most important thing: de-escalate distress and connect with the person. Create an environment in which both of you can live, because family should remain family. So this should not become a barrier for the family to keep going as a whole. The next challenge that I will discuss is communication, and this applies to everyone in the room because everybody living with progressive cognitive difficulties will face communication challenges at some point over the course of the disease. And I will focus on two cognitive functions that have a massive impact in the way we communicate. One is attention. So any input, output, any exchange of information of any kind happens through the gate of the attentional system. And the amount of time that we are able to remain focused on a task is what we call the attentional span. And the attentional span shrinks when we have cognitive difficulties. So let's pretend that this ruler here is your attentional span. You live with cognitive difficulties, and this is your attentional span. And we are Saturday morning at home. Saturday morning again, everything happens on Saturday's morning. And I say to you, let's go to do the shopping now. And then on our way back from the market, we will call Tom to have a coffee with him and with Mary. But your attentional span is this long. So this is what you get from my message. It's not that you are forgetting or you don't understand. It's just that your window of attention is that. So this is the piece of information that is making it through the gate. If you understand this concept of the critical window of attention, it will be very easy for you to provide positive support, because you will understand that in order for the message to be successful, the delivery of the message, then the communication has to happen within that window of attention. And you will understand that you also need to give me breaks between different messages so I can kind of restart my window of attention. The other cognitive function, which is very relevant for communication, is working memory. Working memory is our ability to hold in mind and manipulate units of information for short periods of time. Working memory is load dependent, which means that the larger the numbers of items to keep in our mind, the more difficult the task becomes. And working memory also shrinks when I have cognitive difficulties. Which means that if we are in a restaurant and I'm living with cognitive difficulties, and you want to help me make a decision about the choice of items in the menu for me to make my order, even if I'm able to understand each one of my choices one by one, it can still be very difficult for me to ponder them all at the same time in my head in order to make a decision. But we know that working memory is load sensitive. And therefore, we know that chunking is the strategy to try here. Chunking is breaking down the information in smaller units, and there is a strong empirical evidence of the advantages of chunking on working memory. So if we break down my choices in smaller chunks, I will probably find it much easier to make a decision. And by doing this using this very simple strategy, you are supporting my decision making. You are empowering me, and you are supporting my autonomy. This is super important. So please keep this in mind. Now you understand why we very often recommend using short messages and use the chunking of information when we want to have effective communication. The last challenge that I will address is apraxia. Apraxia is the inability to perform certain motor tasks in the absence of sensory loss. And apraxia is very common in people living with dementia. So it is quite rare in behavioral variant frontotemporal dementia and semantic variant, but it is very prevalent in all the rest of phenotypes. So this is, again, very relevant for the majority of you. There are many different kinds of apraxia, but I will focus today on dressing apraxia, which is the difficulty to put your clothes on in the right way. Very often when we see someone struggling with getting dressed, our first reaction is, I will do it for you, and I will put all the clothes on for you. But there are better ways of doing this, because the act of dressing is a very complex one, recruits many cognitive functions, and recruits also other kind of praxis. So here I've broken down the act of dressing in 4 fundamental steps. Each one of them is of a different nature and recruits different cognitive functions. This means that some of these steps can be impaired and some of them can be preserved at the same time in the same person. We only provide support where support is needed. So for instance, if one person has difficulties with one of these steps, we only provide support for that step, not for all of them. And by doing this, we are increasing the chances of the person to participate and be part of the act of dressing. And this is very important. For instance, if you have difficulties with episodic memory or attention, or you are disoriented in time, you might find difficult choosing the right clothes to wear. But maybe this is the only problem that you have. Maybe you can go through all the rest of the steps very well. So we only provide support here. And we can do it in many different ways. So for instance, we can make available only the clothes for the current season. So for instance, if now we are in winter, only winter clothes in the wardrobe, or we can also lay out in a chair the outfit for today. Failing to put on the clothes in the right order can be a symptom of a different kind of apraxia called ideational apraxia, which is the difficulty to linking sequences of motor tasks in the right order. This means that you may be perfectly able to put any kind of garment on, but you do it in the wrong order. Like, for instance, you put on your trousers and then on top your underwear. And there are ways to support someone with these difficulties. And you can, for instance, separate the items that come first from those that come after. Like, for instance, in this chair, I will lift your underwear, and in this other, all the rest of the stuff. And you need to not only to put the clothes on in the right order, but also you need to be able to do it in the right position. So can I have the coat? And it is very common for some people, in particular those living with posterior cortical atrophy, that you find more difficult to understand what comes front and what comes back, and what is right and left. So you can see people trying to wear this and struggling to find the right hole and how did this work. And this is very often due to visuospatial difficulties, and again, very, very common in people living with posterior cortical atrophy. But we know that people living with visuospatial difficulties can benefit from visual cues. So a practical approach to provide positive support here is showing labels or sticking labels of striking colors in strategic locations in the garment so people can receive some information about the right orientation. Also, if you live with dementia, it's very likely that at some point over the course of the disease, you will develop something that we call ideomotor apraxia, which is the difficulty to perform some motor tasks, like, for instance, combing your hair or using the knife. If this happens, it's pretty likely that you will also struggle fastening buttons and zips. But there is quite a simple way to overcome this barrier, that is using Velcro or similar strategies. So the main learning from here is, please remember not to take over. Provide support only when support is needed. And remember this checklist of these 4 different steps in which we can break down the act of dressing. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found this interesting and relevant. Here you can see my email. I'm always happy to receive feedback, positive or negative. Please make the negative constructive. Thank you very much, all of you. Yes.
Ida, thank you. That was incredibly helpful, and it's just so refreshing to hear someone speak who has all of the kind of science and evidence base and actual specific knowledge at their fingertips, but is aware and so sensitive to the challenges and how difficult these situations are, and that translation of knowledge into what you do with people who you love and in these tough situations. So thank you so much for the effort that you've put into preparing that. That's great. Obviously, we've tackled some topics today. There'll be other challenges that people will face, but we thought it'd be good in the 10-15 minutes or so till we got to lunchtime to take a few questions if people have them. It might be questions or comments in reflection or response to some of the situations that Ida has mentioned, or maybe comparable situations that haven't been covered, or other solutions that you found or struggled with in particular aspects of everyday life. Does anyone want to kick us off by being brave and having a question? Yes, please. Just so everyone can hear, and also in case people are joining us online, if you can, if you're asking a question, if you can talk right into the microphone, that'd be great.
Great. Ida, thank you very, very much. It's just, here's the feedback. Really, really wonderful, simple and basic and just supportive. And I feel like somebody has given me a hug in the process of living with the experience that we're all experiencing in different ways. And it's because it looks so simple and it looks so loving in there. I just feel, I don't know how to put it, but I'm going to put it bluntly, is where do you get the patience to actually cope with that on a daily basis? Yeah. And I know this is a silly question because everybody has to deal with it in their own way. But it's like things kind of tend to slow down as we all know it. And I was just telling my friend earlier today is every day you kind of try to slow down a bit to come to terms with the pace that your partner is going through. But then the next day you realize that actually I need to even slow down more. So, yeah.
It's not a silly question at all, because it is a massive challenge put into practice all these things. So they look simple in a screen, but also, as I think I've mentioned, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, because the situation is very complex. But I think that the goal of, I think it is better that you know that all these strategies exist than not knowing them. Then embedding them in your daily routine takes time, it takes practice, it takes a lot of failing, and also sometimes finding the right way to make it work for you, because it is also about you making it work for you and for the other person. So this is just practical information, but then it's up to you using it in a way that really works for you. And I agree, it is a massive emotional challenge in the patients and the time, because sometimes you don't have the time to do all this. So those are barriers to put all these things into practice. But it is also true that the more of this you do, the more skilled you become, and the more simple it becomes to build on new skills. So it is still good practice to try even a bit of it. You don't need to do everything. Even if you do everything, it won't work perfectly. But building day by day small bits of skills, this can help you in the long term.
If I could just slightly chip in, I guess it's a repeating theme at meetings like this. That one of the main reasons for having these sorts of meetings is not only to get information from the front, but to share experience. And often that experience is a complete sense of failure and a complete sense of defeat. And actually, even just sharing that, if you're someone sat in the audience thinking, I can't do any of that, that's fine too, because in sharing that and knowing you're not the only person in the room who's in that situation, I think you're more likely to find one day, maybe it'll be one day in an entire year, where one of those things pops into your mind and actually can be actioned. And even that, I would say, is a win. It may sound trivial, it may sound like I'm trying to be too positive, but even sharing the negative experiences and being at one with each other about that is really helpful. Yeah, next question.
I just wanted to share a little experience covered by one of your headings, which I don't think you actually expanded on. That was not recognising your home. Yep. Before my wife went into care home, when things were getting very difficult, late in the evening, sometimes after 10 at night, she decided she wasn't in her home. And it was very difficult to convince her that it was. In fact, it became impossible. Used to call one of my sons over, and we decided that we would take her home. In other words, we dressed her up late at night, sometimes 10:30. They would take her for a drive around the block or somewhere remote slightly. I would be at home to greet her, and then she would come back, and I would open the door when she came and welcome her home. This worked for quite a long time. It was very difficult because my sons had to leave their homes late in the evening to do this. But it's going along with the delusion and the trying to resolve where the home is. I just thought that was the point.
This is one, thank you very much for sharing, because this is one of the most beautiful stories I've ever heard. It is really beautiful. And 100% positive support, because you didn't fight the delusion, you create safety, you connected, family remained family. An awesome example. Thank you so much for sharing.
It took a while to get.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I also found it extremely helpful. Thank you. My husband has PCA, and it's just absolutely spot on. It makes me realise there is a reason. It's not just sort of a big model that's difficult to comprehend. Two things, and if there isn't time, I can talk to you afterwards. But one is, my husband likes to take his wallet with him, which is fine. But then he opens his wallet and he can't find the right card, and gets in a muddle. And it's the one thing that causes the most stress for him if I'm not there. So any advice on that? And the second, I suppose, is I'm just looking at potentially a respite break where he goes into, there's a guest house that's opened locally, especially for this, which is great. So the staff are trained. But I find myself thinking, how on earth am I going to make it okay for him to go there, given all these different things that we do at home to make it okay? That makes sense.
Yeah, complete sense. I think that we can continue this conversation later, because this goes a bit beyond what I've been discussing today. But these are very common challenges. This becomes very difficult for many people, and receiving, I think, the right kind of support is very important. Probably we can advise on this later.
I think on the practical, on the wallet front, I think that's something a number of people have come across, and again, we can talk in more detail about, but certainly lots of people who've had 3 different accounts for 3 different types of expenditure, simplify things down to one, or just trying to reduce that choice to make it easier for someone in that situation just to know there's a card, that's the one I use. But we can talk. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But and being able to ask for help is such a stuff.
On the avoidance of conflict topic, how would you suggest dealing with the "you didn't tell me that" situation? Because how do you get around the fact you did say what it was, and the other person says, no, you didn't?
You didn't, yeah. So avoiding the conflict here, I'm afraid it has to do, I mean, these are general advices. So every situation is different. So here I cannot be prescribing solutions for cases that I don't know. But for instance, general advice here, avoiding conflicts sometimes will go through accepting blame that is not our blame. Yeah, because if you say, no, I told you, then you are escalating the conflict. So here the general rule is escalating. So the best way, and sometimes you are the best person to know what's the best reaction. So because you know the other person, so you know what will make things better. So it's up to you sometimes deciding what's the best strategy, what worked better in the past, and what didn't work that well in the past. So building on things that really work well. You really need, time and patience and people skills.
This is a similar one, but my dad says to us, "You're killing me," and we say, "We're not." But to positively support him, do we say, "We are"? What do we? It's when we're trying to change him or care for him. He says, "You're killing me."
Well, I think we need to understand that there are situations we are not trying to solve the situation. We are trying to make it more bearable so we all can live with it. So you know him better. So any strategy that you can use, any kind of interaction, any kind of maybe change of topic in the conversation that you can use to reduce the So she said, this joke of, what's that? So distract the attention. But the whole idea that I want to convey, I cannot give you specific strategies, but the whole idea is trying to find a way to put down the volume of the tension in the situation. And you know better than anyone else, but you are the experts living with a person.
Just a quick one on the home thing. What I do is just say, well, we'll do it tomorrow. It's late now, sort of Nathan's upstairs, our son or whatever. So we'll take you home tomorrow, and that's fine. It doesn't seem to be an issue as long as you address it. With the wallet, again, I gave her a purse with very easy to access with one card in it, and that cured that problem. But my problem is now with the food. So you'll say to her, do you ask, do you want a drink? And she'll, do you want a hot drink or a cold drink? And she can't really decide,
Okay.
And the thing about it is, then she'll get frustrated and not want a drink at all. But I don't want one,
Yeah.
Or she'll have something, so I don't like that. Well, do you want something else? I'll get you something else. No, I don't. And obviously, you've got to get food and water into them,
Yeah, but maybe what you can do is show her a cold drink and a hot drink, because maybe at that moment she cannot really make the distinction in her head, so she cannot make the decision. So maybe you can show her and use this visual aid to help her make the decision, or you can also maybe show her an option first and the other after. I think that by what you're suggesting, she will be probably able to make a decision if she's received some visual support.
It's easy when you tell us, isn't it?
It's not easy to do. I mean, this is very challenging, even when you are a clinician and you have this evidence base. It's still very difficult to implement. So, thank you.
Last couple of questions.
Hello. My wife is now about 7
no, maybe nearly 9 years following diagnosis. And I remember the most important 2 words for being married or having a partner are yes, dear. And I was told about a book called Contented Dementia. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, by Oliver James. And it says exactly in great detail and more depth of just what you've been telling us. And Contented Dementia taught me when my wife said, who are you, where's my husband, to say, he'll be here very soon. And that was perfect. And if when I was getting addressed or undressed, she was distressed, saying, you're really hurting me. And it's no good saying, I'm not. You say, I'm sorry, darling, I'll do it a different way. And this book, Contented Dementia, was just wonderful. And it builds on exactly what you've been saying. So thank you very much for your help.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing, because now everybody knows about the book. So thank you.
I'll check afterwards that Ida's pseudonym isn't Oliver James.
Hello, I just wanted to ask a question. This is, I'm now the chef at home. I never cooked him, I now have to be the chef. But my wife seems to have lost all sense of taste, and whether it's my cooking, whether it's just something common to her condition, but I'll give her fish and she says, what are we eating? And if I said it's fish or chicken, she would accept either. She really wouldn't know the difference between. So she really has lost all sense of taste, which is a bit depressing. And maybe it is me. Maybe it is my cooking. I don't know. Is it something is this normal?
This happens in some kinds of dementia, that you lose actually your sense of smell, and this affects your taste. Because actually when we are tasting things, the flavor has a lot of input from smell. So this happens actually to many people.
So it's not my cooking then. Thank you.
Go on. I'll be nice. One last question.
Well, I was just going to say the only way, my wife's got PCA, and it was diagnosed about 5 or 6 years ago, but I think, as with many other people, it was a much longer term problem. However, the only way I can cope actually is to collude and agree. Where this can bring problems is when you're dealing with other people, because in so doing, for instance, at an assessment or anything else, people say, well, she must be okay, because she'll say, well, of course, I'm totally capable of doing all the cooking, but he insists on doing it. And the only other way, and the way I have coped with this in my own life, is to ensure that my wife is actually colluding with me in doing the things that I want to do, like going on expeditions. And we've done a whole series of expeditions now to Morocco, to Tanzania, to Peru. And I'm getting to the stage where I have to put a rope on her because she might fall off certain things. But I do feel that having these objectives all the time, so we have to keep fit. We have 2 dogs, and I have to say, if anybody wants somebody to help, get a dog, because dogs are so kind and helpful. So to give you a little example, she forgot to put the lead on, and the dog, who can be naughty, walked around the whole area and brought her back as if he had the lead on. So I do think there's a sensitivity with animals, particularly dogs, which we may not appreciate. It empowers the person, and what I've been doing my whole time with my wife is actually to empower her as much as possible. And I do feel, and I hope, it is helping her. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to add something to the meeting today, and it's that this is such an amazing story, like all the rest of the stories that you've shared. So when you have this feeling of failure, that it is very common, I think that you need to make an effort to remember how amazing the majority of you are, and how supportive and how able you are to provide positive support. You cannot fix the situation, so you cannot make the disease to disappear, but that doesn't mean that you are failing. There are barriers that are just very difficult or impossible to overcome. That doesn't mean that you are failing. So all these stories that I'm hearing, they are so amazing, so inspiring. So I think that, you should feel very proud of how well you are providing positive support, which I'm learning that actually, many of you are already doing it. So, yeah.
Can I take this opportunity to just say thanks again to Ida and to all of you for your questions as well?
Thank you.
So a brief reminder that it's now a lunchtime. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the gentleman at the back. Is it Ron? You were talking about your cooking. I'd just like to reassure everyone that Ron hasn't made the sandwiches. The sandwiches are Pucker welcome sandwiches. During lunchtime, if you have a moment between mouthfuls and chats, the UCL legal team will be around. Can I just ask you guys to wave? Katrina at the back there. Hello. So if you would like a chat with the legal team, please do jump in. I'm looking briefly at Nikki to see if there are any other lunchtime reminders that I need to give people. Or I should probably press on that.
No, just for the...
And then just to remind you that we'll return back into here at 2 o'clock?
Yes.
1 o'clock.
We're back here at 1 o'clock. No, we can go to our groups at 1 o'clock. Sorry, we're getting very confused here, aren't we? Yeah, it's confusing me. So lunchtime now, we've got the National Brain Appeal and the legal service here. There are signs about all over the areas for the different sessions that are going on. If you don't know where you're going, please see one of us members of staff. So they'll go straight into your groups. We will tell you when it's ready to go to your groups, and then we will come back here at 1:50. Claire's here now, so it's all right, we're saved, because she knows what's going on.
And there's a map on the back of your agendas showing you where each of the different groups are taking place. Anyway, sandwich time.